time, bro.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm not going to ask you which are in the film industry, which are in the game. Okay, because you've been asked that like 5 times today. I'm going to talk about not just game audio, because I think it's growing beyond games, as everyone's alluded to. I've been doing this since the mid-90s, and games were like this, and they're kind of going like this. And now, there's interactive entertainment, nonlinear storytelling of all kinds. We're seeing the demand for folks like us go up in many ways, even as we see some of our value go down, and I see people complaining about what we're getting paid in certain markets. But I see a lot of opportunity. I'm going to talk about that as well as the artistic side of what we do as well, because it's inseparable. I'm going to hit on a lot of every talk today. Come on, give it up for this. Everybody that spoke before was just, you guys have been treated to a real set of experts here, and I'm going to try and build on every one of the talks that you've seen today, and I'll try to bring them in. So the other thing I'd like to just say, I'm going to do, the first part of my talk is going to be slides and discussion, and the second half is going to be all demo, so I don't have to flip back and forth between Wwise and PowerPoint. But I like it interactive, so I don't necessarily wait till the end for questions if something comes up. This is a casual audience. We can just jump in and say, hey, wait, can you clarify that, or play that part of the demo again? Go for it. To start, what I'm going to do is talk about your music's journey. As a composer, we'll use the term games, interactive entertainment. And it kind of looks like this. There's usually an audio director, sometimes the music supervisor. I'm trying to use the term music design. I'll talk a lot more about that in a little bit. Of course, there's the music composition. There's virtual orchestration as a part of that, usually wrapped in. And then production, orchestration, conducting, recording, mixing. Sometimes we wear those hats too. Now there's this other side, integration, Wwise editor integration. But we also haven't talked about game editor integration, and I'm going to at least talk about that in terms of how it's related to Wwise, because we often limit our conversation to the integration of making layers or sequences, and there's a lot more to it. Then there's music logic, and then there's the programming down at the lowest level, usually getting the game engine working with Wwise. So think about all of those areas, and in the music that you've written for games, or that you would like to write for games, where have you participated? Where are most people participating? Most of it's right in number 2, right there, composition, virtual orchestration. When people think of writing music for a game, that's what they think about. And that's what most game composers, who call themselves game composers, that's where they sit. They might put a team together to do orchestration and conducting. Maybe they conduct their own work, but they get an orchestrator. I do. Maybe a lot of times, if it's depending on the budget, I mix my own stuff. If I have more of a budget, maybe I can get someone to mix or master some stuff. So you put together a team. That makes sense, right? Makes total sense. Whether that team's all in-house or whether it's all freelance or some combination thereof. And you want a good team for your music, because that's your music. It's going in a game. How many people have been involved and been paid for working in Wwise? Okay, that's great. How many people have been paid for working in the game editor itself? It's a lot, actually. Pretty good representation here. Doing music side in the game editor? Let's see the hands again. Okay, pretty good. Sometimes that includes music logic. So when I talk about music logic, because Wwise doesn't have a scripting language of its own, and sometimes we need to do more things. It needs to be smarter about how it's relating to the game. And in Unity, that's often done in C#. In Unreal, that's done in Blueprints or other places. And then there's the integration side. So it doesn't usually take a linear journey like that from top to bottom. Your music doesn't. In an ideal world, my ideal world looks a little more like this. So you got direction and design, music direction, and as Olivier pointed out perfectly, in collaboration with the development team, creative director, game designer, etc. Then you have composition, logic, and production, all of a piece. Holistically thinking of the design and direction, when you're thinking of the direction of the music, you're not just thinking, oh, it needs to be this kind of music. How is it going to motivate the player? How is it going to move the game along? How is it going to interact, be a part of this experience? Just like in a film, you would say, where should there be music? You also need to think about where should there be music in a game and how should it, help your protagonist, which is the gamer. So there's that. So interestingly, on Facebook, there's a good business, what is it called? The business column on Facebook. Yeah, business skills. How many people are a member of that group? A lot, right? Who saw the post with, hey, somebody's looking for a horror genre thing? Yeah? And no, it was a couple weeks ago. And basically it said, I don't know what the total cost was, $2,000 for X minutes music. And I did the math, and it was like $230 a minute to $300, $400, $500 maybe tops. But the number of demo postings, well over 100. Well over 100. How many of those people know how to do music design or integration? Probably less than 1%. There's hundreds and hundreds of composers looking to do that one little portion, the composition portion. And in fact, most of the time, they're being spoon-fed the direction. Oh, we want it to sound like this score, right? We want it to sound like this. Here's the things we put together. And if you veer off too far, they kind of shuttle you back. So it's not even a collaboration on that front a lot of the time. Sometimes it is. If there is collaboration, that's where it happens. But even more so as a game composer, especially freelance game composers, you get handed a cue sheet. Here's what we need. Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. Composer, this is what we need. We need the romance theme. We need the exploration theme. We need some battle music, some boss music. Here are the cues. Go. Here's some images, right? This is standard working practice for most composers in 2018. When I was a working composer in 1999, I thought, great, here we go. This is going to be great. And by the time we hit, 20 years on, I thought it would be further along. That said, we are making progress. So I'm good at predictions. I'm just not very good at timelines. It's just going a little slower than I expected. But I do feel openings. I mean, today's a great example. We saw so many excellent ideas that Matthew put up there, just whipping through all these cool examples of what can be done. And now, as Alex was pointing out with Nuendo, I can shuffle these files back and forth. This is great. This is progress. So how do we close the gap between me as a composer and the game client, your client? Right now, it's a nice, easy transaction. I love the handshake that Olivier had. It's like, yep, it's transactional. I go away. Composers, it's great. I get paid $1,000 to $2,000 a minute. I don't even have to score a picture. I hand it off to someone else. They take care of it. I get to make a soundtrack. But we're doing our industry a disservice, and the games that we're writing music for. We need to be more of a part of that. And even if you're not the one doing the actual integration work, we need your compositional brains in that decision-making process. That's why I'm trying to bring up the notion of music design. So, doing more for your clients. Music design as a service. So, one thing that kind of gets me is that you have composition and then people look at integration. And I talk to many, many composers in the gaming world, and they say, well, that's technical, that's too technical. I'm like, you gotta be joking. Here you sit, you talk about your libraries and your tools. All you see on Facebook and Twitter is what new gear people have. It's not any more technical, it's different, there's a different mindset, it's a new tool to be sure. But like any tool, you take it on because it has a creative end in mind. It starts with a creative impetus. I want to use this tool because. I want to use, Reaper because. I want to use these plugins because I want this creative output. So you take the time to learn it. So music design is the act of creatively thinking, where should the music go? How do I want it to be a part of this game? And writing that down without thinking about technical things at all. The first thing I do is I don't think about vertical layering or horizontal this or whatever. I'm thinking about what do I want to have happen, where and when and how in the game, in the context. It's a spotting session. So I've been freelance again for my third time over 20 some years. And this last year and a half, I've had pretty good luck getting paid for music design as an addition to composition. So it's not just a creative thing, it's a financial thing. So on a couple of occasions already, it's been specifically, I need you as a music designer. One good example, Alien Descent, which was a location-based entertainment thing where I got hired. I got the gig because there was a composer on it who was a linear composer doing television work, mostly in film. And he didn't know Wwise. Said, I need you to take my music and get it working in this project. And it wasn't just, we need you to put it in Wwise, and here's how it's done. It's like, I don't know, we don't even know how it should work. So the first job was creatively to figure out where music should go, and then to figure out how to lay it out. Now, it turns out they also needed me to do technical consulting, and I ended up mixing the whole game, so it turned into a much bigger thing. So I'm getting paid for these things now, creative and technical consulting. Sometimes, especially, think about it, if you're working for an indie game company, they have zero expertise on site. Usually they don't have an audio director most of the time. So they need not only the creative expertise, but a technical expertise as well sometimes. So these are roles. If you're looking for work in games, it's not just, here's music, I need to find a client. These are other things that are possible. So you're expanding the range of clients you serve as well. For example, there are audio teams that might not have your expertise. Like when I was at PopCap, I would hire Stan Lepard as an orchestrator, and David Sabian as an orchestra contractor. I've been hired as either a creative consultant or music design integration person on projects. Other composers. I just mentioned one example where I was hired, subcontracted by another composer. So this can work in a couple different ways. If you're a composer as a freelancer and you're thinking, God, I want to be able to offer this to my client, but maybe I should find someone to team up with. That's a valid way of working. Again, there's a lot of creative collaborations like this, whether it's a composition team, one focuses on orchestra, one focuses. Anyway, there's a lot of ways you can do that. It doesn't have to be, I have to do everything. Now, I love doing everything. I love knowing every end to end of what the music, that journey we just went through is about. And I love being a part of that. And that's the audio director in me. I've been an audio director, and as an audio director, you have to know the whole chain, the whole pipeline of the music. And you can be an expert in certain areas. You can't be an expert in every single thing. But as an audio director, maybe a music supervisor, you need to understand that whole line. And as a composer for games, it behooves us to have at least an understanding of that entire chain, even if you need to have a programmer help you do this. Now, people think, oh, you do these complex, interesting, adaptive scores, you must be a programmer. It's like, no, I'm just really good at communicating with programmers. And that's one of the key things I've been able to do over the years is like convince developers, programmers, designers to take a wacky thing that I've demoed up or written down and make it a reality in a game by collaborating with the developer. So that's a key interface. That said, I'm also taking the time to learn some of these deeper systems like blueprints and C#. But that's just my crazy side. I want to go deeper on that. Another thing is, for closing this gap, templates are going to be a key. Because what happens, especially as a freelancer, we're on the outside. We are on the outside, and that's a lot of times, there used to be technical logistics that were really hard to overcome. For instance, you'd never get into anybody's Perforce project or GitHub. But these days, it's much, especially indie companies are open to it. Actually, I'm working with one AAA company where I'm on a Perforce, check-in Wise banks almost on a weekly basis. And I'm working with 2 indie companies where I'm working in Unreal and have the whole project right there in Perforce. We Slack, we, use Discord and Perforce, and we're communicating like this. So the mobile office where you can be integrated technically is there. You just need buy-in and trust from the developers you're working with. So it's very possible. And so you can be a seamless part. In fact, one team I'm working with is a completely, co-located team, Seattle, LA, other places. So we all call in and we're working from different locations. So this is a reality, and it can become more. So as you're setting up a home studio, think about those kinds of working conditions, because it makes it so that as a freelancer, I can now offer all the things I want to do, which is go deeper than just the music, to go into the integration and the design side of things. I can play the games, I can play the builds, I can actually be there, and then throw ideas onto Discord. Hey, what if we did this? And they go like, oh, no. So you're part of a team. And that makes a huge, huge difference. But another problem that comes up is, oh my God, we need this, but we can only have a couple months, so we really don't have time for something that's too adaptive or whatever. So just throw some stems. I want to close that gap. And how do I do that? How do I get to a point where, we all think in terms of, I can compose a minute of music a day, right? Or something like that. You heard that. Or, oh, I've done 3 music. People have this kind of muscly thing of, oh yeah, I did 5 minutes the other weekend. Whatever. But we also need to be able to figure out how to design quickly and to implement quickly. Because most of the time, the reason implementation falls flat for these companies isn't because sometimes they don't care, but more often than not, they simply don't have the resources, the design resources or the programming resources. My goal, my company goal, I'm a company of one, but I'll hire as I need. My goal is to be able to pull up to a company and plug in a project and get it working in days. And I think it's possible. How many of you are performing musicians? Okay, a lot. So 2 types of bands or musicians, right? One that comes, they have the rig, and everything's in separate cases, and they walk up on stage, and they need 4 hours because they have to plug everything in, and it's all just like this. And they hand the mixer a spaghetti of cable, right? Here, help me plug all this in. The other type is the one who walks up, everything's kind of already compact and plugged in where it ought to be, and they walk in, and they hand the mixer a stereo pair, or maybe a surround mix, right? But in other words, I want to take the load off the developer, because even if they want to help, they might not be able to. So you take away those friction points by being able to come in. Maybe I have a team together that can integrate Wise into Unity or Unreal. Boom. And I can slot in an interactive music template. Boom. And maybe even some starter music to just like, hey, do you like this sort of thing? And they're going to go, whoa, you did that. How long? Right? I want to be able to jump into a project and set down trigger points and work with their logic systems rather than have to ask for that stuff. Now, it's asking a lot, but that's the long-term goal. So with that in mind, I'm going to talk about some Wwise music templates. How am I doing on time here? Okay. So with templates, I've been thinking, how do I speed this up? How do I get this going? We have these different types of templates. Wwise can work with templates. How many people work with the work unit system, right? So I'm starting to create work units in Wwise, which you can import into other Wwise projects. Vertical remixing template that's empty, that I can slot things in, horizontal resequence, sampling instruments, blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about each of these, and I'll have some demos. So importing work units. So whether I'm creating a Wwise project from scratch or importing, I can do that. All I have to do is bring my work units into the already existing Wwise project, and I have templates ready to roll. So templates are, I consider them the little kind of the building blocks, the DNA. But from there, you have to you build those into what I call recipes. Now, it's like, okay, it sounds kind of paint by numbers, but it's not, because in the end, you take those and you make it specific to the game. And the music that goes into it is usually unique as well. And believe me, when I get into it, it already becomes more and more specific to the game as you dig into it. But at least the template gives you a starting point. Why reinvent the four wheels and the chassis of a car every time you want to drive one? So recipes for an entire game. I'm going to talk about macro templates. There's two areas of what I call music design that have not been the focus for most of what you read in even textbooks. We talk about, we can do vertical and, these very little tiny concepts. Let's just do layering. Let's do resequencing. But how many people think about what a template would be for an entire game and how that looks? Think about the entire game. So I'm going to show an example of that. And micro templates. And for me, this is the other side that isn't talked about as much, except here today, which has been awesome. So these are recipes for moment-to-moment adaptive scoring, because up until now, the adaptive scoring that we see is usually what I call minute-to-minute scoring. It's like, okay, we've got traveling music. It's a few minutes long. We might even add a layer, right? But it's kind of minute-to-minute. And then you go into battle, and that's a few minutes, and you come out, and you're in this other area for minutes, right? Minute-to-minute scoring. I'm interested in seeing what we can do with moment-to-moment scoring. So I've been experimenting with that, and I've done those types of things in other games. And again, I agree with what's been said here today too, that one of my rules is keep it as simple as you possibly can to achieve your creative goal. I don't believe in complexity for complexity's sake. It's the game. Is it serving the game is your final, to reiterate what Olivier said earlier. It's about the game. And is it serving the game and the player and the audience? So here's an example of both a macro-micro template combined, where I kind of put this in practice. So Peggle 2 is a fairly deep adaptive score. And the gameplay loop is similar no matter which character you play, but each character has their own set of music. So I had written different sets of music that followed the exact template or recipe. So it was a completely different piece of music, but following that recipe. Now I got further on, and I'm like, well, I would like to have different creative takes on this. So I got my my cohort Becky Allen to write one, and composer Stan Lepard to write one. But they had to follow what we did, because that's what the game needed. And this is how cool it worked. So basically we had them in, and we kind of had a school session on how the Peggle system worked. And we kind of went through everything, and we wrote it down and took screenshots of the whiteboard and all that. And then they went off and did their work, and they didn't just give me WAV files. They gave me work units, full, completed work units. I literally dropped them in the game and pointed the right states to them, and boom, it was working. It was remarkable. Of course, let's fine-tune the mix, to be expected, right? But That experience made me realize, yes, we can do this. And Stan was an outsourced composer. So I worked with an outsourced composer who just handed me something and it worked. I didn't have to do any more labor on my end, other than a little bit of mixing and connecting the states. So that's the potential. I'll quickly go through this. The Wwise authoring API, that's a future talk, but for the programmers in the room, I'm curious what the potential is there. And I talked about blueprints in C#. That's not the topic of this talk, but that's the next level of closing that gap. What I'm going to be focusing on today is Wwise. So game syncs are an easy one. I got my little pointer, look at this. So these are some templates I've made. So I have my own little work unit. It's called Music States Template A, and I have a state group for vertical remixing. Boom, super easy. So anytime I'm going to do some vertical remixing, I can just copy these and make them. Why create, right? Oh yeah, here's horizontal, create. Start with this. It seems so straightforward. Same thing with game parameters and music triggers. So I have a set that are already copied and made, and I can just, any session I start, I can just pull those up, okay? So these, I'm gonna start from simple and go to more challenging. The resequencing. So I already have switch container template with playlists and a segment, and the segment is in the playlists, and it works, and it's looping. And this isn't all perfect, but it's a really good place to start, and I have my states assigned and so forth. So if I open up this templatized session, it's all working and I can start from this place. I do want to test to see if I bring these two different work units into a new project, whether these would still be linked. Simon, do you know if that's true? I'm going to test that and I'll let you know what I find. I meant to do that before this. And here's what a remixing segment looks like. It's a template, it's blank, and I can drag things in, so I'm going to demo that. So I'm going to zip through these. So I'm going to quickly just, so I can get through my slide deck, talk about what the demos are. I'm going to do vertical remixing, slide decks, a Wwise sample instrument, short demo if we have time. If I should skip one, that would be the one. A pre-composed game score. I'm going to talk about this. Now this is really exciting. I had an intern last summer. Seth Wright is his name, and he's at Eastman as a graduate student. And he's awesome. He's a really good composer. He's a gamer. He helped me set up my PC, and he's highly ambitious. And he went back and said, I think for my graduate thesis, I want to write a game score. And I'd like to do an independent study with me. So we started working on that basis informally, and I'm grateful. Mark Waters, his composition instructor, said, "Well, let's formalize this." So I'm working more formally with him now via the Beale Institute at Eastman on helping him create this adaptive score. Seth just recorded 90 minutes of music in sections for this thing. What you'll hear today are his mock-ups. And he's going to start pulling these into the Wwise session, and the next set will be how do we get this down to size. So I'll talk more about that as we go. Pretty cool idea. And then what we're actually going to do is, this isn't just it is a fun project, but it's also going to be, we're going to go out and see if we can find a game, an indie company or someone to license this soundtrack. And this is an idea is to pull up to this company and say, here's my surround pair set, we're going to plug it into your game, get some states rolling, and you have a score. If it's the right game, right for the right soundtrack for the right game, right? Of course, that has to be the right things. Like, oh yeah, this sounds like it'll work. And for an indie company, that might be tempting. So, and Empire Film Music Ensemble did this live recording. They're an Eastman ensemble, and they would get a cut of this if we do get a license. So that's pretty cool. And then the other one, Hitting the Right Moment, is going to be a demo I worked on very recently, up until last night, working on just concepts for moment-to-moment scoring, and we'll look at that. All right, let's jump into demos. And Any questions so far while I rip over to the demo side of things? Okay. So I need to escape out of that. I can actually quit that. There. And now I'm here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I have my mouse. Yes, the lights. So first thing, I'm going to close this up. And I have down here, I need to go back to function F10. I have one of my empty little things here, my states. And I'm going to show you how easy it is. Now, this isn't quite as cool as the Nuendo thing, but you can see how this is still quite possible. It'd go like this. Let's minimize for a moment. And I have these guys. So here, okay, back to Wise thing and back to this. So I have 3 tracks. And these are composed. They were composed in Reaper. And sometimes when I do vertical remixing, I do this very, very basic thing of rather than layering, I just move from one full mix to another, and I find you have more control sometimes. So I'm just going to drag this into, now this is one track, a segment with one track with several subtracks, each one already hooked up to a state. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. Let's see. Action would be 3. Why does it not let me do this? Am I grabbing the wrong? Ah. That's a WAV file. Here's tension. Why? Let me try just generically dragging it. Am I in like read only or something like that? Oh, my transport is open? Is it because I got 2 Wise projects open or something? Let me just play. Okay. All right, there's something in the air. Yeah, I can't drag it even over any of these things. Yeah. Because this is already in the originals. Oh, maybe because I already have them in? Because I should be able to drag it even if I already have them imported, right? Yeah. Well, let me try it. Let's see. Can I do file import from here? No, I can't. Oh, okay. This was easy. This is very strange. Anybody? Okay. Yeah, let me, just for kicks, I'm going to close this other project. Save. Yeah, I can save. It's not like it's locked. That's weird. Oh. Is that, oh, I've done it. No, I always do that. I do that so that it's always definitely in the right spot. Well, let me copy it and see what happens, just to see if that is the deal. All right, crazy talk. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, now I have this other thing. And that's it. It's the project. What the heck is going on here? Well, all right, if this isn't going to cooperate, I think I already do have it in here. There, I just did it, see? That is so bizarre. All right, I do want to get to the bottom of that, but I don't want to take our time. So here it is, and if I go to this segment, and here's my states listed here. I have 0. Sometimes I like to have silence. Now, this is for a kind of an 80s John Carpenter-esque game that I can't talk about yet, but they really wanted squarely early 80s synthy stuff, so that's what I gave them. Had a blast pulling out my Jupiter 6. So I have basically 3 states, and that's how it works. It just kind of crossfades between them. One reason I like to do this right now, only this one is playing. The other 2 are not. Because I can do more filtery things that I wouldn't want to do on the more actiony tracks. All right, so that gives you the idea there. I'm going to just go back out. Then that's the simple example where, again, I should be able to just drag and drop. Now, one thing that it doesn't do is I always have to fix the end marker and make sure that that goes at the end. But other than that, if you make perfect loops, you drag them in, you drop, and you go, and you save yourself a lot of steps if that is working. All right, so now I wanted to come back over here and show you another quick little thing. Launch this guy again. And here we are. So I work with MIDI a lot. I'm not going to do a big MIDI demo here other than, how many people, I bet there's very few hands here, how many made sample banks in Wwise? Okay, a few, oh, actually more than I expect. I think we're all in this room. So, let's see if I got this working. Yeah, with the latency and everything, which is great. I have the latency because otherwise the tracks get a little stuttery. But anyway, this is what sample banks look like in Wwise. If I open them up here, let me just kind of go. Yeah, here's one specific bank. And actually, let me go to another example. We have 3 clarinets. Usually they're made like this, where you see the wave files. Do you want me to enlarge that, or is that okay? You see the wave files underneath, and you come up to MIDI, and you can look at the key map editor. It looks nothing like something like Contact, where you have this keyboard, you can just kind of flop them on and make your ranges, but this is what you have to do, and if you do it by hand, it takes a long time to kind of go through it, because you drag them in and you just go. So I was creating a bunch of sample banks, and I learned a lesson pretty quick that I could create a template. So I have these templates, and this particular set of sample banks, if you know sample libraries from the 90s, you'd know the Sidlacek name. And they work pretty well because they're sampled in thirds, which works if you don't want to take up too much memory. So let me come down here. I have this, here we are. I created this little mixing unit here, and I have these defaults. So these are defaults for working with samples in third. In other words, the key map is already laid out. This is a template. It doesn't have any waves in it right now, but what it does have are the MIDI note numbers that I need to fill in. I don't have to fill in all the entire range, but I can fill in any range in here, and it will work. So I have an example here. So I have, if you're doing in thirds, there's only 3 possible types. So these for sample banks, layers, and minor thirds, these are the 3. You could do this for half steps as well. I'll talk about layering in a minute. So here I have some cello samples. And if I copy, okay, what are the letters on it? So if your samples are labeled with A1, A2, A3, etc., I know that these are thirds, so that's key in labeling. A, C, D sharp, F sharp. So I need this one, and I'm going to copy it and kind of bring it up here with my cellos, paste it into my cello mixer. And now I've got this guy. Now there's a little bit of dragging and dropping, and it's on a small screen not the best, but basically what I do is I take each one, I can drag it up. Okay, first ones are going to be, that's A1, I just drag it right there. And A2. I guess that'd be easier, wouldn't it? Can I open up 2 of these windows? Shift E. Look at that. Okay, see? You can never stop learning this stuff. So now I'm up here, default work unit, and general sample banks, cello. Cool. I will just leave that open here. That is fantastic. And then I can come down here and simply drag these over much more easily. So that even, see, this is why, this is an ongoing project, and obviously I think there could be a script that could do this even automatically, but even learning something as simple as, yeah, open up 2 windows, all of a sudden it becomes much more straightforward. So I was able to do banks like this. Now sometimes you have to go in, D sharp 1, D sharp 2, and adjust your ADSR envelopes and stuff like that to make it right for each one. But at least the ADSR envelope is there, which it isn't if you're doing it from scratch every time. So I have all of that stuff templatized as well in here with kind of a basic setup, pretty quick attack or no attack, etc. So there it is. And that's all the range I need. And now, here I am. Here's my new cello patch. So it's a crescendo cello. So that's done. And if I want to layer things, here's an example. I don't do it in one single thing. You can take all those samples and split apart, 64 to 127 are one set, and velocity 0 to 60, 3 are another, and you can get a layer. But it's much easier to take 2 sets like I just created and share them in a mixer, in a blend container, sorry. So I've got cello and staccatos. Oh no, that's, well, let's see. So it has the sustain and those all in one. So that's just a simple way. Each of these were created with the same method, and then by combining those into a single, you can create layers and stacks or cross-switching either way. All right, so that's that demo. Yeah. Because it's live in the game. So in other words, in fact, that's a good question. The question was, why not just use Contact? Well, in fact, I do have all of these Silicek libraries in Contact, and I can compose in Reaper, create my MIDI files, bring them over here, and they will sound virtually the same. But I have the benefit here of having MIDI and samples in a game, which have 2 benefits. One, oftentimes it's a memory saver. And the second benefit is it's much more pliable in terms of dynamic music. It's so much easier to do moment-to-moment composing when you have notes that you can let ring out as you're transitioning to another melody. You don't have to worry about, oh, that faded, that cut off that note. When you pre-record stuff, you're always cutting something off, or you're trying to dovetail, and it's actually harder to work with when you're doing really, really intricate adaptive design. So those 2 reasons. So my hope for the future is that this is just kind of a starting point for Audiokinetic, but that we get a third-party software sampler to plug in, whether it's Native Instruments or someone else, right? That'd be cool. Imagine if you could just take your Contact instrument that you created innuendo, drag it over to Wwise with the MIDI file, and it sounds just like it because it's Kontakt and the same MIDI file, right? Let's hear it. Yeah, that's good. Other thing too is why stop there? Why not bring my software synthesizers over too? They might have to be more economical, but for sound design and music, having real-time synthesis, I got to do real-time synthesis on that Russian squares game that we saw earlier today. And the power of real-time filtering is remarkable for music. Remarkable. So that's another dream I thought would be here by now. We're still pushing along. I keep trying to nudge it, so help me along. So that's that. All right, thank you. That's a really good question. All right. So now I'm going to open up Seth's project, our project, our little collaboration here. So I'm going to close this guy out. I don't need to save you. And that is this. So what I'm going to show you, I got him started in the right direction, and over the course of his internship in terms of Wwise, and kind of cracked open some of my sessions and showed him how I work. And he just took it and ran, and really did some interesting things here in terms of using states to their maximum. So here's this interactive music system. But what I'm going to start with is looking at his game syncs. So let me see if I can magnify. The second. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And I go back to magnifier, and I can go like this. Close that. And okay, so I might be able to see this a little better. He's got combat levels, but basically he's been thinking about it first as an entire game. So first of all, it's what type of music: combat, dramatic, environment, or menu. So think of these as nested states, and this being the top level, because it has to, what type of music is it, is the top level. And then he has all these, well, if it is combat, which combat is it? Is it 1, 2, or none? Okay. Which dramatic? Is it big 1 or big 2? You can see how these are expandable. If you ever wanted to add, say, a fourth environment, you could do that. Title screen versus pause. So that's the next level over. Which type? And then, can I do this here? Yes, I can. But then within each of those combats, the third nest down, he's got combat levels. 0, 1, 2. He did, 6 different levels to his combat. And dramatic is a type that he adds too, just to add kind of an intensity. Environmental states, he has a beauty section where it kind of opens up into this melody, into his main themes. The other thing about this is a coherent score. It's not just a bunch of cues. He has a title theme and other sub-themes that come and go throughout this entire score. Time of day or night, is a factor. And there you go. So it's just in that alone, it's an interesting set. So let me play that. And one thing I like to do, especially when you have all this kind of nested states, a lot of times there's a mistake I think composers make in saying, okay, programmer, send me these states from the game. You can do that, and it works very well. I prefer to create events, and then I trigger those events, the states within those events. Then I can change things over time. I can move the event. I can add other things that can happen. You can do a whole string of things in an event. It's really powerful. So with that, I go to F8, and I know there's easier ways to do this. But here we go. This kicks off the system, and I'm just going to play, a little bit, and then go through some of the states from here once it gets to each of these. And so this kicks it off with his menu music and the title theme. Oops. We have just a little more volume. I don't know why it's not. Thank you. So this is the working pieces, and the live pieces will come in a little bit, or probably in a couple weeks. But anytime I can go into the game and we'll be refining all this stuff. And this is an explore state. I think most of it sounds great already. So we'll see how much hybridizing we do with the live instruments and his virtual orchestra. And a lot of these are in stems, so they're really flexible if he wants to. And he does make use of variation. Like if I come back to this explore run, it's different. I'm here at dramatic. And I can go to different levels of dramatic. Right now it's level 1. See what goes on. And we'll run through some of the combat here. And he really starts it down and brings it up over the course of a combat. And each combat encounter could be different. And the thing is, part of what we want to offer to a company is we'll tailor it to the specific game, both in how it's integrated. One thing I like is this emotional thing he has here, kind of lets it release a little bit. Kind of opens up into a... I didn't mean that. Now I just jumped it right back to level 0. Yeah, it didn't work out too badly. But anyway, we'll be doing a lot more just kind of smoothing of all those transitional edges, but that's usually the last thing we do. I can crack open one of the segments here just to get a peek at it. Like this kind of. Actually, I should come over to F10. And yeah, you can see he's been doing a lot of good stem work. That, again, a lot of good reuse with each of these parts when you do that. Must be an ending. Anyway, so that's that project. Again, thinking about a game holistically. Okay, now over to this one, and now I'm going to close this up and go to this little thing I've been working on. I wanted to see kind of a little challenge to myself, how I could, again, explore moving moment to moment. So if you notice in film and TV, it's not just, okay, here's the music for this scene. There's a build. There are looser moments, but there are also key moments, sometimes soft hits. Like even just notice when the harmony, of course we're composers, we notice when the harmony changes either on a cut or just before a cut, or it leads into another scene. One more demo coming. Don't turn on the lights just yet. So I wanted to play with that. So part of this demo, I'm going to come back over to this, is to try to experiment with that. So I have chords that literally can hang there until the next trigger and next trigger. So these series of triggers are supposed to happen in pretty quick succession, knowing that I'm going to hit a moment and then have a little bit of indeterminate time, hit another moment, have a little bit of indeterminate time, and so forth. And then there are certain points when you go, okay, I have a build, I call them climbs, it's going to climb, that's going to be at least maybe 3 bars, 4 bars, right? And that's going to happen, boom, and then I have another indeterminate part where it's going to wait until the next thing, and so forth. So you have these determined lengths followed by an indeterminate time where the player can do something so I can time the next thing. And then there's indeterminacy time. So that's the concept. See what you think. And I was able to do this relatively quickly. Oops, 8. Here's what I want. Oh, I already set it going. Look at that. It's been playing the whole time. All right. So, can you see this? So this sets it going. It sets it off in silence. I like to do that, so it's always playing. These are the chords. I have kind of a drone that builds up in layers. This third and fourth section come in as a bigger climb, brass, and then kind of an ending. The ending's just a finale ending. So, there we go. So that's one chord. Here comes the next one. Right? So I imagine, how would I use this? Maybe I'm in a VR game and you notice a certain vista. Now notice the chord isn't static. It's going to taper off and move down a little bit. It can't be static. It would get annoying. Here's 3. Right? Not a hard technique, but it's one I can imagine using. And here's chord 4. And those are transitions on the beat boundary. So it's pretty quick, but still keeping your timing together. And here's where the drone comes in. This music bus. We need our sub in here, man. There was a lot of sub in this puppy. I'm probably gonna bust this out if I do it too much. All right. So this drone can go on. So you could be wandering around in this particular area. Again, this is a nondescript thing I was just experimenting with. But see, things come and go. It's not just a static 4-bar loop. Things come and go. That's why you want to construct things with subtle variation for moments like this, when someone could be here for 3 seconds, they could be here for a minute. And then the layers start coming in. This pattern can happen a few times, once, maybe 3, maybe 4, and it's going to move on, depending on how quickly the player is moving through something. You can go backwards too. Now layers aren't always layers. Layers mean changes, not just stacking. That's why this one's different. Kind of builds. Now here's the climb. So once it reaches there, I can go on anytime. Same thing fast climb. And this I'm counting on 4 measures or so. And now I can go on anytime. I'm at that point, right? Something can happen, but I don't know when, right? And it comes to a close, and then out of the dust, this just sneaks in, and the finale just kind of plays automatically. And this is the same chord pattern that you heard in the beginning, except without the control, it just plays. So I kind of have A, B, C, A. And it cycles a few times till it comes to an end. And it's all in A flat until there's a glimmer of hope. And with that, I'll take questions. Yeah.
I'd love to see in your interns project.
Yeah.
How exactly you were.
There it is.
How you were actually hooking together all those nested states.
Yeah.
I've never used nested states before, so that sounds pretty. Whoa, hey,
That's better.
that sounds pretty interesting. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Super easy. And the nice thing is, one advantage of working with Wwise 2018 1.3 and 1.1 is I can have 2 open at the same time. Shh. Okay, so I'm back here. Yeah, and the place to look at that to start, if you look at the top level of this, here is the best thing Wwise did with states in a long, long time. This is basically a state machine. And there's different ways you can approach this. So in other words, when you look at this, so here we have all of these states, which type of music, which environment, which dramatic, which combat. And this is the combination of those 4. Let me see if I can point this out. Yeah, this is better. Deep. Okay. So these are the state groups, and these are the states within each of those groups, right? So down here, you can drag any combination of these along here. And wildcard is the star. So if it's combat, I don't care which environment it is. I don't care which dramatic music. Combat, star, star, combat 2. So it's combat, blah, blah, combat 2. He's linked that to combat 2 here. Okay? So I think this was new in 2017, and I just went, whoa, this opens up a lot. Here he's got, so look here, combat none, he's got combat 1, and combat star, 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 he's got combat 1. So basically he's just filling in all the combinations he cares about with specific switches here. Now so that's just at this top level. He's got 4 states at this top level and filling them in with other switch groups, which you can have sub-states within each of these. So if I take a look, we looked at combat, so let's look at combat. Let's look at combat 1. What does he have? Yeah, within combat, so this is the nested further, which combat music and the combat level. So this is all combat, the path, combat 1, cinematic breakdown. So combat 1, cinematic breakdown, he's paired up to the playlist, combat 1, cinematic breakdown playlist. Combat 1, cinematic emotional, he's got appropriately assigned. So he's taking this is just combat 1 with all of those. And if I go to the combat 2, now, again, because there's always a million ways to do things, he could have just had a combat switch and had these two here and had a whole nother set down here. This could have been combat 2, blah, with all of those and had those portioned out. It would have worked the same, right? And might have been simpler too. So, but that's how he's got it nested. And he's just done that with each of these. So he's got basically, in terms of switch groups, or this always gets me, switch containers, he's got one master and another set of nest, right? And then, but within each of those, he's got a couple. So, yeah. Anyone else?
This was a great demo. And what it reminded me of is that quite often it can seem as though, as composers, we get, or we tend towards, in interactive situations, a single key.
Yes.
And so, therefore, my question to you is, and for Olivier as well, potentially, what situation do you see a piece that has ABBA or whatever kind of format for key switching, modulation, without just going to an enharmonic equivalent for transitions into different states?
Part of it is just the labor of doing all that work, and I think people avoid it, even before things were highly interactive. What is it? I think Myst was like A minor the whole way through or something. So it's a common offense. The only game I've really been able to experiment deeply with keys were when I was using MIDI. Peggle Blast goes through all of them in a circle of fifths, all the major keys in a circle of fifths, because I could simply go, here's, actually it goes around in a reverse circle of fifths, goes around in fourths. But I could hit every key because I could just, a new MIDI file just did it, and I could create custom little transitions. This is, however, though, I think there's an opening here where a hybrid thing could work really well, because if you remember when Matthew was doing his little stingers, he's like, well, I could only do that one. It'd be a lot of work to create that for all these key centers. Let's say most of your score was recorded with live orchestra, and whether it's in stems or not doesn't matter. But you could have markers, custom markers in Wwise labeled with keys. And actually, I've done this before. So this was D major, and this is A minor, and so basically you're making a chord chart across your pre-recorded music segment, and therefore the stingers that play would be in the correct key. So that would be a really great way to zero in on that problem, on that issue.
Or maybe use samplers as well to that end?
Yeah, samplers. I mean, of course, because would that be it? MIDI with playing samples, would be a wonderful way to do that. Because then you have that best of both worlds. You get the live feel with those live instruments, but then you can still have this flexibility with MIDI. That's why I think hybrid MIDI and recorded scores are just a win-win all the way around. And you just blend the best of both in those situations. All right. Over here. Is atonality ever employed? Yes. I think games get away with it a lot more than film, as Olivier pointed out. I was working on, I think, it was at Monolith, Blood 1 or Blood 2, I can't remember which gory game it was. But my cohort, Dan Bernstein, wrote a 12-tone row and a piece based around a 12-tone row for a horror game. It worked beautifully. Gary Scheinman's BioShock had a lot of extended techniques, kind of Penderecki style, long things. And you hear a lot of extended techniques. You don't hear a ton of serial work. You hear a lot of minimalism. Minimalism goes over well, right? So I think, like I say, I think there's a greater breadth of compositional skills and styles in games than I hear in a lot of film, unless you look to the indie side of both of those film as well. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been a lot of fun.